meetings. So, all right, good. In that case, welcome everybody. I see there are, how many people are in the chat here? 27. All right, that's a lot of people. I am trying something new. These are my office hours, like literally, Tim Heidecker does a pretty funny comedy show called Office Hours, but he's not a real professor. This is my real office. This is where I really am. And ever since my wife and I developed this head and heart and heat thing, I realized this is actually a pretty academic thing, and because of that, I thought this would be a good excuse to try live streaming. Now, I enjoy watching people live stream. I participate sometimes. I'm really not quite sure how well this is working. So I'm just going to go ahead, presuming that it works. My wife will text me and tell me, apparently my daughter is watching too, my baby daughter. So hi there. So let's talk about this whole crazy design that we have here. So this all started because, I'm really obviously interested in hip hop, and I'm often interested in the divides that are created, particularly the divide between conscious hip hop and not conscious hip hop, and how often there's a sort of implied hierarchy. And then how there's also a division between like underground hip hop and mainstream hip hop. So I've talked a lot about the reason that hip hop and rap is so powerful is because the mainstream is so strong and the alternatives are so strong. Most other music genres don't have both going at the same time. And then sort of mixed in with all that, I realized that people spend a lot of time sort of putting down alternative hip hop as no one listens to it, no one cares, and it's just for, academics and nerds. And then people put down mainstream stuff as just being about money and cars and hoes. And so it doesn't have any value there. So what I wanted to do was come up with some kind of way of, instead of it being like good and bad, like some kind of system to acknowledge that not all rap music tries to do the same thing. And I think a lot of the reason that we don't like something, I don't know why I have these headphones in. Part of the reason why we don't like something is because it's not doing the thing that we like personally. So I wanted to develop some kind of way of acknowledging those differences. And in particular, I needed to find a way to describe JID's album. So because JID is like of the modern style and he's mainstream, and because he's conscious, and because he's super smart, it puts him in a weird category where there just aren't that many rap albums that do all those things at once. And so I was racking my brain and I was like, well, should I just call them To Pimp a Butterfly? Because Denzel Curry's last album, I think, did the same thing. And I was like, well, I can't just keep saying, is it going to pimp a butterfly over and over and over again? So I really thought, like, what is it about To Pimp a Butterfly that made it special? And then is that something that can be generalized to other kinds, other albums? So that's what led to this whole thing. So my initial take on it was very rudimentary. I'm going to put this up here. This is my initial drawing where, because we had three things, I thought, well, three things means triangle, because I'm not a very sophisticated person when it comes to geometry. So I was really proud of this whole idea. And then I showed it to my wife, the Dr. and Mrs., and she took me to school because she's a scientist. And she explained to me that I needed to get much deeper, because it's not that there's three different things. It's that there's three different dimensions. So it needs to go into this kind of cube form. So when I initially thought of it, I was getting really kind of silly, and I was thinking about ascribing numbers. Now, I don't think that's necessary, on a scale of consciousness, To Pimp a Butterfly, is it 8, 9, or 10, right? I mean, we can't really do that, but I do think it's fair to say, in aggregate, if we take To Pimp a Butterfly, is it generally more conscious or less? Right? So kind of a sort of a thumbs up, thumbs down system. I think we could get deeper, like, and actually ascribe numbers if we wanted to, but that's so subjective that it seemed kind of goofy. So let's see, I'm now going to read a couple of the comments. I arrived to see if this is gibberish. It might be. We'll see. You know what? It's not. The Dr. and Mrs. gets mad at me when I call my work gibberish. This is not gibberish. But thank you for the comment. So this is what I developed, and I want to take you through each of the axes. Hey, Dr. and Mrs., if you could text me, is it pronounced axes or axes? I think it's axes, but we'll find out. So the first one is this head axis. And I just described these X, Y, and Z just randomly. And I want to define all of these things. And the most important thing to understand about this idea is that it is not ascribing quality. I don't think that rap music that is headier is necessarily better. Okay. It's what I prefer. I prefer smart rap music, but I also love getting crunk. Okay. I mean, not literally, but, listening to crunk music. So that's the most important thing with everything I'm talking about today. Don't ascribe quality. Don't ascribe quality. It's more of a description. So anything that I would consider to be head or high head, which if you can imagine a scale, anything over 5, if we have like a 0 to 10, right? It has to be innovative. But if it's not innovative, I would say it has to be like very intelligently backwards looking, so like Derringer's production with Griselda, right? That's very smart. Even if it's trying to sound like something in the past, it's still very, very innovative, right? And then the head axis is where we need to have space for rappers and producers that are technically excellent. So even if they're not innovating something or creating something new, they do the things that hip hop artists do, or that rap artists do really well. So that's the idea of head, right? So it doesn't have to be Aesop Rock. It doesn't have to be using 10,000 words. Okay? It doesn't have to be Billy Woods, and you need a degree in sociology and history to follow everything that he's saying. Head can be Pusha T talking about how to sell crack in 1,000 different ways with a really great flow, right? So that's what head is. I'm going to skip over to heart because often these are seen as together or opposite. But the idea behind heart, and I just chose this word because it starts off with an H. So maybe I should have chosen a better word. You can tell me in the comments if you want in the chat. And then, by the way, at the end of this, I will do like kind of a like Q&A, or maybe even an ask me anything. I don't know if I'll do that. Yeah, I'll try. We'll see. I have to go to an annoying meeting at 3:30. so that's my heart out. I mean, it's a wonderful meeting. So the Z-axis is the heart. And by that, I'm really meaning that rap music has a very complicated history with a couple things. With political consciousness, there's some people that argue that because it was created in the Bronx in the 70s by African Americans, and because it comes from a place where people were forgotten and it's the voiceless, that it has to be all hip hop is inherently political. And I think you can make that argument, and I would make that argument, but I don't think that all hip hop sets out to be overtly political. So when I say political, I mean overtly political, as in Run the Jewels, okay, like Public Enemy, actually talking to power intentionally. But I don't want to limit it there, because I also think, oh, by the way, the plural of axis is axes, says the Dr. and Mrs. Thank you very much. And someone said W. Thank you. I like W's. So the idea, and this is how I teach, by the way, if you're wondering how I teach, I do so many asides because I remember learning, and that's the most fun, is when a teacher gets distracted. So it can't just be political, because I also think that because hip hop involves, or rap music, being an MC often involves so much performance, just like a rock and roll star, right? I mean, it's not like it's much different than Mick Jagger, right? You have to be projecting a certain kind of masculinity. Usually it's masculinity, not always, but there's a performance of a persona. So anytime that a rapper can be emotionally honest, I think it has that version of heart. Because I would argue that in a space that is primarily dominated by a lot of values of masculinity, we would perhaps call it toxic masculinity now, but I don't want to get into that argument. But because it is primarily a space that projects a certain kind of stoic tough masculinity, any amount of emotional honesty or psychological introspection becomes like an act of politics, because it's demanding a kind of emotional intimacy that the art form itself is not known for. If you've been watching my reviews of rap over the last year, you'll see that I'm just so happy because more rap artists from all over the spectrum, all over the little cube I got going here, are becoming more and more psychologically honest, more and more real with themselves, which I think will have the political end, the social end of making a lot of people more into themselves, a lot more self-love, a lot more of these things which are often denied to the people who make this music. So that's the head and the heart. And an artist can definitely have both. It's not one or the other. It's not like, do you think with your brain or do you think with your heart? No, like any kind of music, like any kind of art, you can have a mixture of both. And that's my absolute favorite, when someone is smart, is great at their craft, and then also is able to be emotionally honest. Now, the y-axis. This is the most sort of challenging one. That's what I call heat. The thing about rap music, which makes it so frustrating and so wonderful as a rap historian or as somebody who loves rap music, is that its competitive nature is just undeniable. It is just completely undeniable. It is a part of the fabric of rap music. DJs battle, MCs battle. It is not like, I don't know, painting. It is not like most forms of art in the way that it is explicitly competitive, and that the value of being popular is very important. And I think what happens, especially in academic settings, people like me, we get so used to the concept of art for art's sake. And we think in these high, lofty goals of, I don't know, Radiohead deciding that my Radiohead water bottle, which I drink from whenever I teach. Radiohead said no, they weren't going to make pop albums anymore. And they went to computers. And isn't this the great thing? And isn't this the ideal of art? Well, it is in some ways. But part of what makes rap different is that if it's not hot, it's not hot. The heat is actually an artistic value, the ability to fit in with the zeitgeist, to speak for the people, to be popular. I almost made some joke in my video, to be popular in the suburbs and in the Chevy Suburbans, right? Like, to be able to have that amount of heat and respect is actually something that I think all hip hop historians and rap commentators need to respect. I mean, the example is Drake. Whatever you think about Drake, he has stayed that hot for that long. I don't think anyone has come close to staying that hot for that long. And it is actually an art. It is part of the art. And however much we don't love Kiki, we can't help it but acknowledge it. So that is the basic idea behind these different quadrants. So, the way it works, is the head is the horizontal axis, and then the heat is the vertical axis, and then the heart is the width. This is where I really need my wife here. But those are the three dimensions. And so what I thought was that eventually, when I abandoned the number system, I just realized that things can be in one of these octants. So it's not a quadrant, because quadrant means 4. So octant means 8. There's actually 8 little cubes. And I think every rap album can fit into one of these quadrants. And as I say here, that this is not to determine, to gauge the quality of an album, because a low score on any axis does not mean it's worse. The example I give is the album Act a Fool by King T. I made a video about it. If you've never heard that album, it's like my favorite West Coast rap album of all time. But realistically, his rhyming skills are fine. The production is good. It's not particularly heady. He doesn't really talk about his life. And it certainly isn't a very successful album. But I love it. I love that album as much as I love any hip hop album. It's just a way to describe it. So I'm going to kind of look at the comments over here. Why do people use the term zeitgeist versus trend or phase? That's actually a good question. So, I mean, I use the term zeitgeist because, and by the way, I'm sure other people ask good questions. I just happen to read that one, so don't feel bad if I haven't answered your question yet. Like, I think zeitgeist really works because it talks about, to me, it's a larger sense than a trend or a phase, because something can reflect the time without actually being trendy. So something can be a part of the zeitgeist without being popular. But okay, I'm getting distracted. I got to stop looking at the chat. So I'm going to go through these different octants. I almost said quadrant, but I didn't. So first we have Octant One. And so you see the way it's done here. And by the way, I totally stole all these images from random things off of Google. You can see in this one up here where I took out the watermark. So I did not make these images. I've just labeled them. So this Octant One, which is in the back, right? It's in back right. So this is that quadrant of high head, high heat, high heart. And this is what I'm the most interested in because it's so rare. These tend to be the albums that get the most praise, by NPR, praised by English teachers, praised by sort of like people who want rap to represent more than it does sometimes. So that's why I put in this category Lauryn Hill's album, This Education of Lauryn Hill. It was popular, it was conscious, and it was very smart. And same thing with basically everything that Kendrick Lamar and basically everything that Kanye West has done. I would say virtually everything they've done fits up there. Now, Kanye is a little bit trickier because his relationship to heart is so complicated because it's hard to tell when he's playing a character. And he sort of goes off and on with a sort of callousness and off and on with this political nature as well. But that's how this all started, is thinking about what is the value of that. And then you'll notice next to it is number 2. I'll kind of zoom up on here. And I didn't have anything until today. I had a big moment where I finally thought, I can't think of an entire album, because this is what's really tricky. What rap album is really popular, not with a lot of head, meaning not very innovative and not particularly well executed in terms of rapping and producing, and has a lot of like either political commentary or emotional honesty? As far as I could figure, this is basically impossible because our culture doesn't seem to want very, very positive hip hop. In general, our culture does not want socio-political, emotionally honest rap music. In general, and I talk about this a lot in my classes. In '88, we had Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, and we had Straight Outta Compton. We had sort of a road that we could go down, and in general, we went down the road of NWA and gangster rap and the values of extreme free market capitalism. So because of that, if it doesn't sell to be heady, to be hearty, then how can you have an album that has both of those things? I almost put Arrested Development, the band, but realistically, they're pretty good. I saw them in concert once and I hated them. So I wanted to act like they weren't as heady as they were, but they were very good and very innovative as well, how they used vocals and their samples. But I realized the song Wild Side by Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, the entire album by Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. And yes, I spent a lot of time today reading Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch lyrics, which by the way, were mostly written by Donnie Wahlberg. Who knew? Donnie was the smart one. So the song Wild Side, if you don't know it, it's real bad. It samples Lou Reed, but it was a very popular song. It was a big hit on MTV. And a lot of it was about racial inequality. There's this famous thing that happened in Boston where some guy stabbed his pregnant wife and then he blamed it on a black guy. and the black guy went to jail, and eventually he was taken out. He was free because it turns out the guy who did it, I think his last name was Smart, it was actually just a white guy who did it to his own wife. And Marky Mark has a whole verse about it. And no matter how goofy it is, no matter the fact that the lyric is literally this: blame it on a black man. What the heck? That's the actual lyric. No matter how goofy that lyric is, that was a very important thing, because here we have a guy from Boston talking about systematic racism in the Boston police force, systematic racism in how the media covers crime in America. This was right around the time of Dukakis and Bush and Willie Horton. Marky Mark and his Funky Bunch really did manage to have a politically important song that was popular, and there's nothing innovative about it at all. It's a bad sample, it's bad rapping. So that's my example. I would love if you had more examples of Octant 2. I'll look here in the comments, see if anyone comes up with anything here. See, Lil Dicky, I don't know enough about Lil Dicky. Is he political, or is he emotionally honest? And is he even popular enough? See, that's the other problem. It's a real interesting example here. And then we get to Octant 3, which is sort of the front left. So that's low head, high heat, low heart. I said Drake Scorpio. I don't know. You can make an argument that Drake is emotionally honest. I can't tell. It seems to me like he's not. I think there's a lot of people who could fit into quadrant 3, because basically all that means is just that you're popular and that you're not doing that many interesting things, And again, maybe Drake doesn't belong there. I mean, part of why I want to do this video is just to get more people talking about where we might fit things in these different quadrants. 4, high head, high heat, low heart. This is where most of the great hip hop exists. This is it. When we talk about the golden era of 90s hip hop, basically all of it fits there. Jay-Z, Notorious B.I.G., much of Tupac. I mean, I think Tupac is a great example of somebody who managed to go between quadrant 4 and quadrant 1. I mean, Octant 1, Octant 4. Octant's such a dumb word, But in general, any kind of rap music that is just about money or about how great you are, and then is very popular, tends to fit in that category. And just one more thing about popularity of rap music, like in general, the things that are in the mainstream in most arts aren't very good, right? Like that's part of the reason why the alternatives exist. And so like when rock and roll was great, the mainstream was the best stuff. They like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones in the 60s and the Kinks and the Who, like they were the best rock and roll, and they were happening at that time. I think that's part of how we can see the vitality of rap music, is when the best stuff is also the most popular. It actually shows like the health of the art. And so I think if we get to a point where Kendrick Lamar can't sell out the Boston Garden or the Barclays Center, if we get to that point where it's like only, I don't know, Drake or DJ Khaled who can sell out, who can sell out the stadiums, we'll have to see. Quadrant 5 is where I get most of my views on YouTube. High head, low heat, high heart. That's just a way to describe most alternative hip hop. So when I talk about this divide that happened in hip hop, especially in the 80s, in the late 80s, it's that sense of loss that we could have had a lot more Octant Ones. Because when I think about the work of Public Enemy, every one of their albums, up until I think 91 was their last successful album, Apocalypse 91, I think is what it's called. Like up until then, everything they did was in quadrant 1, because they had the Bomb Squad doing production. Chuck D is as good of a rapper as anyone's ever been. Flavor Flav is the best hype man and a very talented rapper on his own. Like they had everything going in the smarts. With the hearts, they taught they taught me more than I was learning in school. Because when I was in school in the 80s and 90s, there wasn't a lot of critical race theory or any race discussion whatsoever. I mean, really, Public Enemy taught me so much of what I knew. Now, it gave me an over-exaggerated appreciation of Farrakhan, which, he ended up being a much more problematic figure than I thought. But still, like that was that moment. But ever since most popular hip hop has to have at its heart some variation of money is good and I have the most money. Right? That's the basic variation of most popular hip hop. Because of that, it's put people with high heart and high head usually in the low heat category. So I gave Billy Woods as an example, but I could just go on and on and on. I mean, that's where Makami lives. That's where so many great rap artists live, because to have high head, to have high heart and high heat is quite difficult. Low head, low heat, high heart. This is another one which is sort of hard to imagine. So this would be like an album that is very personal or political, but just is not successful and is not particularly innovative. So I chose Chance the Rapper, even though I like that album. I gave a good review of that, but it wasn't very successful and it wasn't particularly innovative, although I don't know. I still think it's pretty good. I put that there as an example. That's another octant that I would like more take, more suggestions for what would be in quadrant 6, like conscious albums that failed. Then we have quadrant 7, poor quadrant 7, low head, low heat, low heart. I put 6ix9ine there and King T. Those are just albums that are neither smart nor political nor successful. And I'll tell you, there are so many of those albums. I listen every Thursday. I listen to, I don't know how many albums I listen to, and there's so many like underground or slightly underground, like rap albums, and I listen to them and like I want to like them, but they're just not that interesting. And it's just talking about bands and the trap and this and that. And it's not good. And like that's the saddest octant. And then finally, we get to my other favorite octant: high head, low heat, low heart. So that's another area of underground hip hop. I use Griselda as an example. I think they're particularly interesting because, Benny the Butcher often goes, he'll often go over to this quadrant. This octant 5. He'll often go over there to the high heart area. And Conway has been moving towards the high heart area as well. And I think we're starting to see that more. I think Makami is another good example where sometimes he's just in this octant 8 and he's talking about his blickies and his monkey nuts and all that stuff. And then other times he's talking about self-love and he's talking about the history of Haiti. No artist, I think, should ever be considered to be pigeonholed exclusively in one little area. I think that in general, though, when we look at albums, we can generally place them in one of these octants. So I'm going to go back and read some of these comments here and see what we say. Wow, rare Professor live stream, only Professor live stream, Sky stream. Hey, Professor, hey, we can hear you with a frowny face. I think that meant up face. Yes, we can hear you. You are audible. Yes, we can. Looks like online class. This is what online class looks like. Try searching OBS. It's an easy live stream program. I will. What kind of audience? Oh, I'm curious what kind of audience you have. You use my videos in your presentations? Well, send me emails, professorskybusiness@gmail.com. I'm curious to know that. I can put that on my year-end report. My audience is very male, is very young. So I think it's like 90% male. I think it's like 90% under the age of 35. And from what I can tell, what they appreciate the most is the videos that I have that have the most success are in Octant 5 and Octant 8, any kind of low heat hip hop. Thank you for your videos. Thank you. What is this gibberish? Well, you can go back and watch. What album would be considered middle of the road consciousness? That's the real question. Someone said every J. Cole album. I don't know. I like J. Cole, but I understand why people made fun of him. Gonna have to dip in 10 minutes. That's cool. I am gonna record this and post this. I don't exactly know how to do it, but I will. Frank Ocean maxing out the Z-axis. That's true. I don't know Frank Ocean's music very well, though, so I look forward to that. Do you think the category of conscious hip hop is different from heart? So yeah, I do think it can be different because I want to expand conscious hip hop to also mean emotionally honest. So I think if someone is talking about selling crack and being a pimp, and is also talking about post-traumatic stress syndrome and about the prison to school pipeline and about having living in terrible conditions and putting that at the center of their crime drama, I think that's heart. And other people might hear it and go, well, if you're not saying this, or that, you aren't conscious. So that's part of what I want heart to be, is an expansion of what we consider to be heartful in hip hop. Can we get a link to these images or slides? Yeah, I mean, I would do it. I don't know. I think I think I have. I'll put another one in my community section. There's the little Dicky comments. Blady. Yeah, I don't know where to put Blady. Someone said they've never heard of Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. Wow, maybe I should do a video about Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. Before he was an actor, Mark Wahlberg was an underwear model. Before he was an underwear model, he was a pop rap superstar because his brother was Donnie Wahlberg, who was the bad boy in New Kids on the Block. New Kids on the Block, which were essentially a whitewashed version of the band New Edition, which is where Bobby Brown came from. They all came out of Boston. One was black, one was white. And it was a really important part of the 80s in pop music. So Marky Mark, that's who he is. Tom McDonald, yeah, I don't talk about Tom McDonald. There's enough rappers talking. There's enough YouTube commentators talking about Tom McDonald. Octant 3 could be Lil Pump. Let's see here. Lil Pump. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Marky Mark is a better rapper than Flavor Flav. Oh, come on now. That one wants a joke. Let's see. It says here in the document, none of this equates to quality. Yes, that is a very important thing. Logic would be Octant 6 for sure. Okay. Heat is such a minor thing for quality. That's true. Let's see. Oh, so I think someone's making fun of me for saying over and over again that it doesn't equate to quality. But this is important, right? Because I don't want, I mean, maybe someone would use this as a way to say what's good or bad, but that is very against the spirit in which it was made. So I am very interested in not saying that Octant One is the best hip hop. I will say Octant One is probably the rarest hip hop at this point. So it deserves maybe a different way of looking at it or thinking about it, but I don't think it's inherently better. Tons of pops and music that's complete crap. That is true. But in rap music, if it's popular, it has value for its popularity, which is part of what separates rap from other music forms, which is why I could not apply this to rock music. I mean, my daughter asked me if I could, not the baby, the older one. She was like, blah. She asked me, could we do this for rock and roll? And I don't think we could, because I don't think rock and roll inherently has success as a metric of some kind of quality. Let's see. I think Lil Pump could go all 3 lower, at least now. Where would Danny Brown fit? That's a good question about Danny Brown. Yeah, I mean, as far as I only know his last album, but so this is where it's kind of fun, right? Because we don't have to come up with numbers. We can just think. We can just go. So is he high head? Well, obviously his rhyming skills are outstanding, right? Is he high heat? I don't know. Is he influential? Is he part of the mainstream, or is he kind of in the alternative? I don't know. I would call that a push. I'm not quite sure where he'd be on there. And then is he high heart? As far as the album I heard was only about sex. And it was very funny stuff about sex, but it doesn't seem personal. So I would be tempted to put him high head, low heat, low heart. That's where I would probably say. But do you sort of see that, like, that's kind of the idea of sort of why it's sort of fun, because we can just sort of think about all of these different artists, like where to put them, like where does LL Cool J go? Like different albums, he goes into different places, Okay, so now I think I did it. So now do I just hang around and wait for people to ask me questions? But there's this weird delay. So people ask me and then I look like I'm not answering them. I wonder what artist has fit in the most quadrants. Um, I mean, I always Jay-Z is my answer to everything, but probably Jay-Z, right? Because Reasonable Doubt was low heat, but very high head. And actually, I don't even know. Well, I hadn't heard of him at that point, and I was a suburban white guy. So I think if he had high heat, I would have heard of him at that point. So I think he was a little bit underground then, and then he obviously blew up, and then he does a lot of good conscious stuff, and he does a lot of good just money stuff. He might fit into all those. Um, yeah. Someone just got here. Where are we ranking Makami? So, I think Makami just varies between Octant 8 and Octant 5. Between sometimes he has high heart and sometimes he doesn't. I think he's a good example of why it's good that rappers are allowed a lot of leeway, a lot of space to communicate, like a lot of different modes to be in. Because in the past, if Chuck D came out and made a song in 1988 and it was all about like jock and hose and selling slang and yay, and no one would have accepted it. Everyone just would have said no, like you don't have that liberty of expression. But I think it's starting to open up now where you can have someone who raps about crime and raps about geopolitical realities and personal demons and have them all kind of exist at the same time. Yay fitting well into Octant One. Yeah, I mean, I think he almost always fits into Octant One. I mean, maybe, I don't know. I've never really liked his second album is the one I like the least. And that's the one that's maybe the least head, but it's still ridiculous. Like the production is still stupid. It's still so good. I think he's always there. Yeah. Whole lot of red. Now this is funny. So my wife is watching this. Isn't this funny? We had the pancakes on Sunday, and I showed this to the kids, and we had a whole debate. Where do you put whole lot of red? I think you have to put whole lot of red in two different octants for two different times, because when it came out, it was very low heat because everyone was so upset with it, and everyone thought that it was garbage except for me. I said it was great. I didn't know anything about Lil Cardi, but I knew it was great. That's fine. I don't like to flex, but I'll flex. So that came out, and it seemed like it wasn't going to really influence anybody. So it seemed like it was low heat. But by the end of the year, like almost everything you hear is influenced from a whole lot of red. So now I'd say that that's about as high heat as you can have. And then the real question is like, it's high head. Like Playboy Cardi is really smart. And it doesn't matter if what he's rapping is I take my shirts off and the hose stop breathing. Like he figured out some kind of way to take the kind of music he makes to its logical end, to this absolute extreme, to the point where even if he's just saying bump out the goose over and over again, like it's heady. Like we don't have to limit it to people who use words like dichotomy. So yeah. And then, but is he high heart? I'd say he's low heart though, as far as I can tell, because his whole thing is that he's not a human being and he's a vampire. And I mean, I guess he does talk about his brother dying, and that's why none of this is black and white, because all rap artists, by the fact that they are making this kind of music, that is this kind of expression, inherently have a lot of political nature to what they're saying. It's influence heat, or had influences heat. So that's the whole idea, is that like your ability to shape and be a part of the zeitgeist is what's in heat. But when it comes to like a lot of artists, in order to really be influential, you also have to have a lot of head, right? Because that's when Dr. Dre came out with The Chronic, like that, however hot it was, it also ended up really changing the way things sound. See, most modern popular rap is Octant 3 or 4, I would say. Yep, I would say that's absolutely true. I mean, it has to be high heat, right? Because that's the nature of of popular rap. Okay, I'm now reading some more things about MF Doom. Everyone knows that I haven't listened to enough MF Doom to talk about him. I just do that. I just have to keep listening to new music, and he died. So I've never had my moment with MF Doom. What about boasting about fame and money when you aren't actually famous nor wealthy? I mean, I think that's all part of the same issue with hip hop, that just the way that much of modern rap music is about money in one way or another. And so if you're lying about it, it's the same thing as having it. I mean, I always say it doesn't matter what the truth is behind the rapper's stories, and everyone gets really annoyed. Yes, you'll be able to find the stream later if I can figure it out. What's the least common quadrant? That's quadrant 2. Quadrant 2 is like, I can't find a whole album of quadrant 2. Like if Will Smith released an album that was all political, like in 1997, if Big Willie style, not even Millennium, if Big Willie style was straight politics, that would be quadrant 2. But it's not. It's not. Okay, I can't see people laughing, but I can imagine them laughing. Let's see. Yeah, lots of talk about Lil Baby being quadrant 2. That's interesting. The thing is, though, isn't Lil Baby really good? Like the sense that I get from Lil Baby is that he's a very good rapper. I haven't reviewed one of his albums in a while, but I think that's interesting, that Lil Baby, because definitely, especially with that song last year, that he is a lot more political. Yeah, I think that does work. I think that could work. But again, that sort of depends on whether or not you think he is low head. I can't tell if these are the right terms. I just wanted them all to start with H. But maybe I could even just have it be the streets and sales axis, the social and spiritual axis, the smarts and skill axis. I don't know. I will tell you, we had a lot of fun, because my wife had to explain to me like how all this stuff works, because she's a scientist and she's done a lot of stuff like this. She's done all sorts of modeling, and I'm like sitting there, I'm all excited, and I'm trying to figure out how this works. What she tells me, and it's quite interesting, is that like when you model things on 3 dimensions, I'm sure she's sitting at home going, oh no, he's about to say some absolute malarkey. But when you model things in 3 dimensions, it allows for so much more precision and so much more like variance in answers. So like if we go back to my original silly triangle model, like I was imagining like, okay, so I would say that Jay-Z has a lot of head and a little bit of heat and a little bit of heart, so he's kind of over here-ish. But like, I mean, like it doesn't quite work to have that level of depth. So that was a lot of fun. Please upload this on the main channel. I will. I think I will. A lot of rappers are low and medium head. Yeah. Oh, XXXTentacion. So I only know him from that the documentary that I watched, and I reviewed the album of it. He's tricky, right? Because God, I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on how you define whether or not you can, okay. So with all of the die too young guys, or about to die too young guys, like Juice WRLD, it's all a question of how honest is the heart part. So when it became fashionable after 808 and after Drake to start saying that you want to kill yourself because you love someone so much and that you have to keep doing drugs because you won't think about yourself, the question is X actually emotionally honest? And I can't make that determination. So I think if XXXTentacion is emotionally honest, then I would say he has high heart. But if it's mainly just an affect that he uses because he knew it could work, and if you watch that documentary, it seems that he was a lot more calculating than he was introspective, then that would put him in the low heart. I mean, definitely high heat because he's so influential, and then high head, that's another thing. Like, I don't know. I can't figure out if he really was technically excellent. I think he was, not as like a rapper, not as like a, can you go toe to toe with Biggie, but his ability to use the different styles that he was able to use, people can't do what he did. So yeah, I would say XXX Tentacion, just first thought would be low heart, high heat, high head. But this is where maybe a number scale would be better, because like when I'm saying like head, I'm saying like 6 out of 10, not 10 out of 10, like Jay-Z and Biggie are 10 out of 10, right? Maybe 6 out of 10 there. And as far as like heart goes, I wouldn't put it at a 0. Let's see here. Juice WRLD has lots of lines hitting death, like already dead. Let's see, would you say quadrant 5 is also your favorite quadrant? Which is my favorite quadrant? So I'm gonna do a total cop out and say that I love rap music. And the reason that I love rap music is that I really don't know what my favorite quadrant is. I mean, octant, not quadrant, octant, because there's 8 of them. Octopus. In general, I gravitate towards octant 5 and 8, like now, because I'm really into the Invisible Renaissance. I'm really into the Griselda crew. I'm really into the underground stuff. Like I've just really been exposed to and really enjoy that. But at the same time, over a long span of history, quadrant 4s were where I was only in quadrant 4, because like I wasn't getting into underground rap in suburban Boston in 1993. I mean, I tried a little bit, but basically whatever's on the radio is whatever you hear, So I mean, like the 2 big Punisher albums, I mean, those albums, there's not a single bad moment on those albums. And they're really smart and they were really popular and important. They don't have a lot of like heart. He's not talking a lot about his struggles. He's mostly just being a good MC, but I don't think it makes it any worse. Oh yeah, and I haven't pissed off any Nas fans yet. Which again, I don't know how I get the I've been saying he is not overrated. Anyways, I think that Illmatic is a great example of an Octant One album. And it was written as a great example of a more Octant 4 album. So I think that's why, that might be why I like it was written more. I don't know. That's just sort of a thing I was thinking about, because I still don't, it's a weird thing about me that I love, this 90s hip hop, but I've always thought that Reasonable Doubt and Illmatic are just not the best works by the people who made them, which is like the weirdest, most out there thought you could possibly have. Nas fans think everyone hates Nas. It's true. Nas fans and Bob Dylan fans are the 2 most defensive fan bases. And, everyone loves Bob Dylan. Everybody loves Nas. You won. Like the victory's over. You don't have to fight so hard. Where does Peggy fit? Well, I mean, he's underground, right? So we'd have to say low heat, and I think high head, probably high heart too, because I would say on balance, I mean, like no rapper's a monolith, right? So I mean, Public Enemy, every song is political, but these days you can't have an album. I mean, you can, whatever. Run the Jewels basically did a full political album, but in general, like I'm thinking sort of the general presentation of an artist. So you don't have to have it be 10 out of 10 songs have heart, but in general, the feel would be there. Cool Keith. Oh my God. Where would Cool Keith? Well, I mean, so I see the problem that we're getting to here. I see the problem. The problem is that term influence. That's why someone asked me before, if you asked yourself before, give yourself a gold star, because you're pointing out a problem with my system, our system. Because like Cool Keith is so influential, but he never had high heat. So kind of where do you do that? So I think I need to take influence out of the concept of heat. I think I need to do that, because really heat is just about how popular are you, how successful are you doing. And then, yes, so I'm going to go back and correct my previous answer. that yes, there's difference between popularity and influence. So I misspoke earlier, but that's okay because this is a live stream and I get to misspeak. Just sitting here in my office. I'm sitting this way so you can see the books behind me, so you really believe I'm a professor. But yeah, so yeah, I think influence doesn't have to be in any of these, but it's more associated with head, I think. Because in order to influence people, you have to do something really well, or you have to do something really new, like Cool Keith did. Well, I can't listen to Cool Keith. I love Dr. Octagon. I love that album, Controlled by Gamma Light. But all that sex stuff, man, how do people listen to like sex rap? It's just so unpleasant. I don't know. Same thing with Danny Brown. Like, I love his style, but I just, yeah. Let's see here. Peggy 2, influence over rappers. You can influence the entire culture. Well, that's an interesting idea. Hello, Jed. Cool Keith is the weirdo rapper, abstract lyricist. Yep, he absolutely was super weird. Yeah, I'd say K-Town goes right in that same area of low influence, high head, high heart. You know, like he's an interesting example of that sort of emotional honesty bit, you know, which is what I like. Someone says sex rap is cringe. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just missing something. Maybe I'm just used to like remembering listening to it when I was like 10 and 11 and I didn't understand what any of it meant. Wow. Hey, this is going well. I think I would do this again. I don't know if I'll ever have anything to say like this exciting. I was also thinking like, you know, like going through my like library of books. I have my Vibe History of Hip Hop, the most 2000s ever written book. I was thinking about like going through this and yeah, that's probably not that interesting. Hey, there's Onyx with Biohazard. Cool. I think I need to get ready for a terrible meeting that I have to go to. Chairs and directors. It's not terrible. Everyone here is doing their best. But a thing that I tell people is that being a college professor is a lot more about going to meetings than you thought it would be. You thought it would all be getting to teach and inspire minds, but a lot of it, a surprisingly large amount of it, is like sitting in a room with a bunch of other people, like talking about things that aren't necessarily teaching. So I have to go do some of that. But this has been great. I'm going to upload it. I hope I can edit it out the beginning at least, so that there's not me just staring at the camera for a while. I mean, I've watched like Zoe B's streams. I've watched I was on the stream with Foreign Man. Although he took it down, which is a bummer because that was really good. Yes, I've watched some, so we'll see. I'm going to comment on this one last comment by Braun Inslee, who's commented on 1,000 of my videos. I get uncomfortable when I try to put more measured qualities to art. I used to do it a lot and almost kind of ruined it. So these days, I just like to have English class style talks. This is a mix of both. That is the main thing I want to say about this whole thing, is if you find this thing to be a bummer, just throw it in the trash. You know, it doesn't, it's useful to me because it helps me specifically to describe the miseducation of Lauryn Hill and To Pimp a Butterfly. Like, it's useful to me because it helped me spatially understand why albums like that are rare and what makes them different from Scorpio by Drake or Run the Jewels 4 or whatever, right? So if it's useful to you at all, that's great. But that's why I really want to insist that there's nothing about this that's about the quality. Because for me to say like things in Octant One are good, things in Quadrant 7 are bad, that's not the interest of my channel, and that's kind of anti-art, I think. Okay, I've done enough talking. I can. How do I stop this? Okay, maybe I'll do stop share. Okay, so this is going to end abruptly, so I'll point to the camera now. I'll do stop share. Will this do it? No, it's just me now. Hi, everybody. Okay, more. Okay, there's the stop live stream button.